Tonight, we are talking about MLB free agency. Where are the stars going to go? And why do we care as fantasy baseball aficionados? It's time for Dingers!
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Cesar Hernandez that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're living tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Childs joined again by Robbie Baseball from the Murder Room. What's happening, Robbie?
Oh, nothing. I just had to ask you for a delay in our recording tonight because I spilled gas all over myself. But that's boat life, Ty. You know, when you're fixing boats and busting motors, sometimes you gotta, actually fix the motors too. So, outside of that, it's playoff time. By the time this comes out, maybe it'll be World Series has started. But it doesn't matter to us. The information we're talking about tonight is top of list.
The one thing we do know, by the time this is released, the Tampa Bay Rays fans are still going to be angry about the infamous. I assume it will be infamous. It just happened. Ground rule double, Sans, ground rule double, standard.
Off the wall, off the body, out of the park. Runner doesn't get to score from first. Interesting.
Yeah. I can't wrap my head around that one, Robbie. As a lifelong baseball person, that's a hard one for me to swallow. And I dislike the Tampa Bay Rays a lot. But I dislike the Boston Red Sox just a touch more.
Well, yeah, I was going to say this series is painful, no different than the wild card was for us as Jays fans. And as we talked about before, Ty, after it was official, Jays were not in. We said it. I felt it was for the best because you don't want a team that's not complete to get in. But the Red Sox, not a complete team. And now if they find themselves, depending on again when this airs, if they're still playing, it'll just be fuel to the fire. But it doesn't mean that I want Tampa to get through. I would like them to just both be disqualified for some reason.
The one thing that I do very much like about Boston is Alex Cora. Like this guy he makes good decisions almost all the time, right?
It's like he knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like he knows how to manage, right? Which is the job. And Kevin Cash does a great job of it as well in Tampa Bay. And we've talked about it this season. Like Boston, in my opinion, is in the playoffs because of their manager and no other reason. Right, because if you go on talent alone, they're not the team that should be there. So
it was not the expectation by anybody that Boston was going to be leading the division for a chunk of the year, and two, because A and two that's how you do counting. Two, that they were going to be this elite offensive machine.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely, and they definitely hit the ball. There's no questions about that. Their pitching just kind of hung in there. So. Let's get into it tonight, Robbie. I assume you are beer in hand.
I'm ready to roll. Let's crack it.
A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
That's how you do it. So tonight I am once again living the Miller High Life. This is my last one, and I'm happy about that. And I also look forward to an upcoming trip to the LCBO to maybe just buy myself a nice variety. So if you have any Ontario craft beers that you would think I am interested in, hit me up at Robbie Baseball 1 at Twitter. If you have something for myself or bourbon for Ty, hit Ty up at Attorney Boss on the podcast as well with your fantasy baseball questions. we're Dynasty. That's why you're here, because you're hardcore just like we are. Hit us up at Dingers Pod, and we can help you guys through the offseason navigate your league. And tonight we're going to be navigating MLB's free agent landscape. And of course, on this list, we've got everybody from the studliest of studs to the dudliest of duds. And there will be guys that are not on this list that end up making probably a top 150 overall appearance next year, because that's the fun of fantasy baseball. But Ty, do you want to start tonight with the top guys, or do you want to start with the unmentioned dudes and then we'll work our way up? Because we're going to be able to go quick at the back end.
Yeah, let's start with the top guys, because I think that's what people want to hear.
Okay.
And then the real hardcore guys can stick around for all of the good nuggets.
Ooh, I like that you promoted and complimented the people that listen to the end.
That's right.
On account of that hardcoreness.
They're our favorites. There's no other way around it.
100% our favorites. So we're going to start off with one of my favorites, Freddie Freeman, who I have listed as, so this is my ranking. Ty will chime in with his if he feels it's appropriate. Agree or disagree. We're just throwing around stuff tonight as far as where players are going to land and what could occur in that spot. So if we disagree on the team, we'll have that conversation if we feel it's relevant. Otherwise, you get certain players who you just know what they're going to do. So Freddie Freeman, free agent. I think he's the top guy out there for me because he's got 5-year deal potential, retire as a Brave. So I think that's where he's going to go back. That's my pick for Freddie.
Yeah, and I think that's the right choice here. I mean, the issue that I see here is Alex Anthopoulos, who is a great deal maker, terrible extension maker.
Giver.
Yeah, not been his
well,
thing
in Atlanta,
career.
He's done better, right? He got Acuna and he
Nope,
got
that was
Albies.
before him. Nope. Neither
No,
of
that
those
was
were
him. That was both him.
Albies maybe, Acuna was not.
No, both of them were him. I promise. Somebody hit us up at Dingers Pod. Well, they'll let the people solve it.
Okay, I think okay. I will leave that there. But Atlanta's the obvious home for Freeman here. But if I will move him on my rank. I have him third on mine only because there's some chinks in Freddie Freeman that we've started to see in his armor. Over time here, that it's not the elite MVP guy, but at the same time, still very, very good. I just see potentially, because of the style of play, an Anthony Rizzo career trajectory here, right?
Whoa.
We're still valuable, but you just might see some things, and they're different players, right? Freddie is a better hitter than Rizzo, right? Rizzo has more power than Freeman, right? So there's a trade-off that'll fit there, but I just don't think the high-end production will just stay there where he's the number one first baseman over the next few years. I just don't know if that's the case. I'd like it to be. I like Freeman. I got nothing against him. I just don't know.
Yeah, that's a fair comment about not being able to stay at the top. But I mean, when you got Pete Alonso hanging out.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about who's going to be the best first baseman in the home run derby, Pete Alonso's my guy.
Well,
but if it's like actual baseball, then I don't think Pete Alonso's my guy.
Well, hey, let's not start giving away our potential dynasty rankings when that's our gift to the listeners between Christmas and New Year's that we like to hand out. So number 2 for me on the free agent list is Chris Bryant, the Cub, traded to the Giants and then having a good finish to his season and now into the playoffs with the Giants. I think he likes it out there. And I think San Francisco has lots of money available. And if they believe that they are ready for the long haul to compete in the NL West, which they should certainly feel confident after taking the division title this year, Chris Bryant should be able to get the dollars he wants and be in the environment with a competitive team for years to come. It could basically be like he started the build or came along with the Cubs at the right time for their peak in 16, held on to try to help, keep that rolling, and then just moved right into another team that wants to do the exact same things that the Cubs did. And San Francisco's payroll is high. I think they were north of 180 million this year. So it's not going to take a lot for them to shell out some more to keep Chris Bryant. And whether that means he moves around and continues to be a multi-position eligible guy, I'm all for it.
They're going to have to be creative for sure. I agree. This is definitely an option for them. I'm not so sure he's the right fit for where this team's at. I think this was a year they knew had some magic into it. And I think they're going to go back into the build around because they do have a pretty good crop of some young talent coming. So I don't know that they're going to bury their money in a guy like Bryant, who just, in my opinion, has too much risk for the age of this team, right? The core of this team is just too old to take on the risk of this Bryant contract. So I think he's gonna get offered a contract to San Francisco. I think that's a given. I just don't think it's going to be the best contract. I think one option that is a good fit, assuming Milwaukee, I think they have a club option on Avisail Garcia. I think Milwaukee would be an interesting fit for Chris Bryant. He could even find himself back on the infield potentially in Milwaukee. So there's a lot of things that could happen there. But I think that's an interesting one. And they desperately need like cornerstone bat in that lineup. So I think it would be a good fit for them.
So this means you're officially out on Keston Hiura.
Yes. Yes. So play that clip back from 2017.
I was waiting for you to be like, officially out. I was never in. Whereas I held on very long. Anyway, next guy up, this is an easy one. Nolan Arenado. He is not a free agent, but he's got an opt-out. Both Ty and I agree. He's not walking away from that contract. That money is not out there somewhere else. And again, Colorado did not pay $50 million to get him in a Cardinal uniform. Just so we're clear, they paid $50 million for Austin Gomber. All right, everybody, keep that in mind. Number 4 for me is Clayton Kershaw. If he doesn't have an option, team player, otherwise, which there's something within his contract, like some type of option, he's going to stay, like he needs to be there for the Hall of Fame end of it. Like I would hate to see him leave and do a mad bomb, where he ends up somewhere else in a 4-year deal and he's a much lesser pitcher. Now, we are unsure if we're going to see him in the playoffs or not. Maybe by the time this is aired, he has or has not, or the Dodgers are out. But
he's definitely out for the playoffs. That's been
okay. So he's definitely so this gives him the opportunity then to get this kind of contractual stuff sorted out, so that we know what's up. But I mean, Kershaw's got to stay a Dodger. Ty, you agree?
I do. I mean, I don't think it's best for Kershaw in terms of the dollars. I think it's best for legacy. I think it's best for the Dodgers. I think there's a deal there. I will say this though. I do not think it's a long-term deal. I think it'll be a 2-year deal. I think it'll be something short that doesn't bury the Dodgers. Something kind of rich, like 25, 26 mil for 2 years, I think is what he could potentially chase. But I do think that they're going to keep it short if they do it at all.
And a caveat to this is, of course, what happens with Trevor Bauer, because that's a lot of money. And we're not playing the game of this is what's going to happen because we're going to say all these dominoes fall. But ideally, Kershaw remains a Dodger. Next up here, my number 5 guy, record-setting power season for a second baseman. Even though he's a shortstop pedigree, is Marcus Semien, who spent this year with Toronto. He got paid as a Blue Jay too, right? He made 18 mil this year. And I feel like Toronto might just have the money kicking around to give him a few more years. I don't know what he's going to want. If this is going to be a long, 5+ year thing, I don't think Toronto's going to be up for that because they know they need to do something with Bo and Vlad. But if there's a way to be creative, I feel like Toronto's the right spot for him. And Ty, you've said it. He's not going to get a better stat line outside of Toronto and this year, but you have a different landing spot for him. Do tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could end up in Toronto, but I think it's going to be too expensive. I think the premium that they're going to have to pay on the free agent to get them to Toronto, I think it's just going to be too high on Semien because the position second is so weak. And he said before the end of the season, I still see myself as a shortstop. Well, good that you do because no one else does. You are a second baseman, sir, and you're going to get paid because of that. So you need to stop talking about shortstop and just get paid as a second baseman. But I actually like the White Sox here. I think there's some flexibility they have to do this. They've got the core team. And fun fact, when we started this episode, they were down 6-1. And at the 9-minute mark of this episode, we're at 14 now. But at the 9-minute mark, they then took the lead 6-5.
Oh, they came back. Oh, good.
So they were down 5-1, and now they're winning 6-5. Sorry.
So Luis Garcia with Houston must have got lit a lot, like a bunch of other pitchers have in the playoffs, just to be
correct.
Fair.
So yes, but I like that with Madrigal moving out. Cesar Hernandez has a club option, I believe.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's the right fit for the White Sox, even though Cesar probably is affordable. I think
Power breaking season for him too, Ty. Like this was Cesar Hernandez's best power season. So that was mostly done in Cleveland, by the way, but same division.
Well, and the reality is too, what you could end up with is both of these guys, right? This is the way this could play out. If you're in
Impressive.
win now mode, like Cesar could play third, second. Semien could play the aforementioned shortstop from time to time. Right? There's a value to have that depth. So, but I do think that the White Sox are an interesting move, and I do think Toronto's very, very much at the table. No questions about that.
Yeah, I feel like Semien may be Toronto's top offseason target, even though he's been in-house, and we'll get to that shortly as to who some of those other guys are. Next up here is Max Scherzer, who I've got at number 6. And I mean, Scherzer's amazing, elite, but he's 6 because of the potential for the contract, right? Like this could be a $30 million a year contract, very much like Justin Verlander had. And the Dodgers are in dynasty mode, just like Houston was with Verlander, minus the sticky stuff. So I could see Scherzer being on some type of a, rich type deal. Again, if there's an issue cleared up with Trevor Bauer and his contract money, I could feel like that just goes straight to Scherzer's pocket.
There's a 0% chance that he gets less than $30 million.
Okay.
He's going to get paid by somebody. He just brings too much. He's a gamer. He's still got it. He still strikes out a ton of guys. He pitches lots of innings. He does all the things that you want to see in a potential free agent. I have him number 1, and I have him number 1 because he has the most impact on a team that he's signing with. So I'm not using the dollar figure here because that's, to us as in fantasy owners, isn't relevant, but it is relevant to the team he signs with. And if it's relevant to the team, odds are that's going to give you fantasy value. So that's why I like him there. I like him in the AL East. I like Boston, New York, Toronto. I think we'll all take strong runs at Scherzer, and very much like Scherzer potentially staying with Toronto. The Dodgers have to be at the table for Scherzer here. And I think you're right. I do think that there's a very high likelihood that if the Bauer money is buried, it goes straight to Scherzer. I do believe you're correct on that analysis.
Okay, so next up here is Justin Verlander. I mean, he and Scherzer are the same pitcher, basically, right? Like late career guys, insanely dominant. And for me, I can only see 2 spots: returning to Houston because Houston, so unfortunately, still has it and he wants to win, or going back to Detroit because some elite guys like to do that. Now, he won't go back if he doesn't see the opportunity to win, but Detroit was better the second half of the season than they were the first. They could very well be, and I mean, this is a bit of Utah being in my ear all year about the fact that Detroit could make some substantial moves this offseason. Getting a guy like Verlander to come back for 2-3 years, or one of those, player options, give him a 4-year deal, and with 3, whatever. It's a 4-year deal, but there's player options after 2, 3, and 4, right? So if Detroit doesn't provide the promise that they said they would, he can walk and try to find another ring if he so desires. I love Justin Verlander returning to Detroit. I think that would be the coolest move, but you have him going to a place where pitchers go to die.
Yeah. No, I understand that, and I'm sending him to the Angels, and I think it's a really interesting move because his wife, his very famous wife, obviously is in the entertainment biz, and so the West Coast makes sense for Justin Verlander in that sense. And there's no team that needs like elite veteran pitching more so than the Los Angeles Angels. Now, we have talked about it a lot, Robbie, and kudos to you for being ahead of the curve. They do have some young guys that are coming. So what better to offset that with than somebody like JV who can come in and give you even the veteran presence. Like even if he's a mediocre starter out there for them, that offense should be good enough for them to win games. So I think this move makes a ton of sense. I think he's going to fit into what they can do. And I think he might even take a discount to come play with the Trout Ohtani show.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how it's been within that division, that's very interesting. And if Houston so desires the turn of the page with their team, which could happen after this year, it's certainly not, I don't think they're going to lay down and just try to clear a house. They're not pulling a Cubs by any stretch, but there could be the opportunity for him to go elsewhere. So next guy up here, potential AL Cy Young from this year, Robbie Ray. He's my number 8. And I see Ray going to Milwaukee. feel like it's a money move. It's a team that won their division. Seems to be like the kind of division the NL Central is up for grabs every year right now. And having Robbie Ray go in with that Corbin Burns, Woodruff rotation, that's scary. So I like it. Ty, you got a Central team.
Yeah, I just don't like Milwaukee because there's a guy Ashby out there that's going to be sneaky relevant next year.
He absolutely could be sneaking under the radar in Dynasty as well at the moment.
Big time. I agree. But I think the logical spot for me, and it was kind of, there was a prelude to it at the trade deadline. You saw Lester and you saw J.A. Happ, which both ended up in St. Louis. And Robbie Ray, I think, is the perfect fit to replace those guys who are both free agents. They clearly need a left-handed pitcher. He's probably the best one on the market. He's probably the best left-handed arm we've seen on the market in a couple of years. So I think it's a logical fit for St. Louis. They're a team that's ready to win. They've got the right things. And just to bring it all home, you've got a tight shirt that plays center field. You got tight pants on the bump. It's a great fit. So just perfectly coming together on that
Just
one.
a couple Rolling Stones there.
Right.
Shout out to Nicholas Gott, who was the one who told us about that. Now, the next one up is interesting and fantasy relevance, I would say, as well, for the Scherzer, Verlander, Ray trio. It's irrelevant where they go to me, Ty. The landing spot doesn't matter. In a points format, these are all the 25 plus point per game type guys. Robbie Ray could clearly be the guy that sustains this for the longest period of time, but he also has the shortest track record of success out of those three. And even if you go up to Kershaw as the other pitcher we've talked about so far, Robbie Ray still is the highest risk as far as high-end repetition, but he could by far have the best payoff. So if you're a major league team, I'm sure that's the same thing. If all four of those guys are kind of like core potential free agent signings for you. So just something to know. Next guy up here, Ty, club option with Cleveland is Jose Ramirez. Now, even though I don't think either of us believe that the club option is going to get denied, we both think that there's going to be a new home next year. And my home is based on what you've said, again, because, you're in my ear here. Tell everybody what you think is going to happen with Jose Ramirez this offseason.
Well, and I think it ties back into the Semien conversation. I think the reality is Toronto's going to be priced out of Semien, and I think they're going to make the trade for Jose Ramirez. It was clearly too rich for them to do it at the deadline.
You heard it here first.
Well, Chai Davidi from Sportsnet, broke the news that we all knew already, that this conversation had happened at the trade deadline. So this is the basis of it is already there. So it's just a matter of kicking that last prospect over. And if Semien's out the door, it makes a ton of sense for Toronto to do it. And they can spend their money on pitching, which is what they need to do anyway. So I think this is a no-brainer. It gets the left-handed bat. It replaces Semien. It does all the things you need to do, and it's a savvy front office move. So I agree with you, though. There's no chance Cleveland's declining the club option. There's way too much value to own him and trade him. So I think that's a no-brainer. But I do think that he is out the door before the start of next season.
All right, my number 10 guy. Now, if Ramirez was to go to Toronto, and depending on exactly what the dollar value would be, that is a very, very big move for the Jays to make. And again, this will have to draw from prospect capital, which is dynasty owners. We all know there's no point in having prospects and never getting them all the way up to the big league club if you could move them around to get yourself an established MLB player. So just like in Dynasty, if the Jose Ramirez deal comes up for Toronto, they're kind of silly not to make it. Of course, it depends on what they're asking for in return. But based on where Toronto's system is now, unless it's, outside of Groshans, I don't think there should be any Toronto player that's, deemed untouchable.
Martinez.
Well, I'm just thinking if you can get 6 years out of any of those guys, say Martinez, you can get 6 years out of him, or you can get 1 season with Ramirez and then have the option to continue that relationship as he's a free agent after. I think that far outweighs like what you can get done in 1 year next year with an affordable Jose Ramirez could be worth giving up a couple of those types of guys. I mean, every front office is different. Toronto was willing to do it for Barrios, which they're kind of pushing their chips into 2022. But at the same time, some of their best players we've already talked about, and they're gone. Marcus Semien gone, Robbie Ray gone, and I'm gone to the market right now. They could go back, but anyway, it's a lot of Toronto talk. We're gonna have to switch it up here. So let's go to Nick Castellanos, who with the Reds has a player opt out. I don't know. I think he's going to exercise that. I don't see why he wouldn't. He's got a great stat line. There are teams out there that could use him. I could see the Dodgers, for example, taking him. Super Dodger move, right? Betts could be in his ear because, Betts is a great dude, and he can help to attract a guy like, they paid me. And maybe it's something that they do some type of earth-shattering Dodger trade that frees up some young first base outfielder type guy who looks like he's stoned all the time and hits from the left side. Maybe he gets moved out and that frees up some room for a guy like Castellanos. I don't know. I could see that happening. Ty, where do you think Castellanos could go?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to the Dodgers. They just have too many options. I do think there's an outside shot he stays with KC on
goes to KC, you mean?
Or sorry, I meant to say stays with Cincy.
Oh, okay.
I do think there's an outside shot he stays with Cincy. And I think that's a very strong possibility.
They love their outfielders.
Yeah, they do. And I think it makes sense for Cincy to keep him. And I think it actually makes sense for them to extend him. And rather than letting him opt out and hit the market, like they should be working on a 5-year deal right now.
So they take this opportunity to just lock him up. And then they obviously are trying to sort out their pitching, but that is clearly something that cost them games this year, was pitchers just blowing up in the first 3 innings.
Because the reality is if they lock in Castellanos, it make it a lot easier for them to go get a pitcher after that, right? Knowing that they have some stability in that roster, because it is a pretty good offensive roster, right? Overall, and there is a couple of other pieces coming. India's going to get better. There's other guys coming. So, I think it makes sense for Cincy. However, I do think Castellanos is going to leave, and I think Kansas City's going to come calling. I think that's an interesting fit for them. His power profile is a good fit because he's not an absolute masher. He's not looking for short porches like some of the power bats do. So it's a really good fit for him to just be a productive middle of the order bat before or after Salvi. I think it would be a really good opportunity for Castellanos, and it would be a good fit for that roster. So I think that's a strong possibility, and they're going to have some money here.
Okay, I like that one. Number 11 is Starling Marte, outfielder. I can see going to San Diego. It's as simple as Pham's gone. Has some Kim, not a sure bet as an MLB shortstop option, and Tatis might, be missing time to start 2022 if he has surgery. It's just there's balls in the air, and this is a team that will have a new manager. Was that confirmed yet? No, still not yet.
They fired Tingler. Tingler got fired.
Okay. Officially gone. Yeah. So
they haven't hired a replacement. I did hear Ron Washington, which any of the Moneyball fans are just waiting for Ron Washington to resurface so we can use all the quotes again.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. But yeah, so because of the uncertainty with some of the positions and where they're all going to settle, getting a elite bat in Marte, stolen base, speedy, all those things could really help out with the outfield, because they do have, Hosmer at first. I think I'm trying to remember right now if we're going to be talking about Will Myers or not on this, but regardless, they've got some bigger dudes that, you could have a guy like Marte come in and really help to get things done. Now, if Tatis moves to the outfield, your need is essentially gone. However, like I just said with Kim, you have to believe in the defense that he can provide you in order to allow that to happen, or you're going to have another situation where you're kind of crowding that infield and trying to see where everything's going to work out. And then you have injuries and poor performances that lead to a sub 500 season. I don't think San Diego's front office can sustain another one of those. So
I agree. I just think they have to spend their money on pitching, right? Like they need to solidify it, period.
Well, they've got enough guys that should still be back that I think it could be okay, right? Like they're going to lose Darvish, who I think we forgot to put on this list, by the way.
We did. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe Darvish has an option. I don't think he does, but anyway, he's not on the list. So, and I will say I referenced MLB.com for their ranking of free agents, and Darvish's name was not on it. So
Darvish
perhaps
is free agent in 24. So,
so Darvish is there for a while.
Correct.
So that's why he's not on the list, everybody. So they've got Darvish, Paddock, Clevenger should be coming back. Morion won't be available, but they do have Musgrove. Casey Musgrove is
Weathers.
there. Blake Snell. So Weathers, yeah. So there we go. There's 6 right there. So I don't know if they need to spend money.
These guys. I just said
they need to upgrade. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they just need to solidify.
So where do you think he's going? Where's Marte going for you?
I have him back in Miami. I think there's a
What?
good fit there. I think there's a good fit there. And the reality is, like, to San Diego, like, he's a center fielder. Like, there's a 0% chance Starling Marte is going to be like, I'm cool playing left field, right? There's some guys that are like, not full-time excellent center fielders. Starling Marte is a center fielder, and he's already done that with Pittsburgh, and I don't think he's going to do it again. So I fully expect him to be a center fielder somewhere. And so for that reason, I like him back in Miami. He said he kind of thought about wanting to stay there. They traded him. So it wouldn't be outside of the realm of thought that there's a deal concocted where it's like, hey, we're going to trade you, but come on back and we'll sign you. We're going to get a good player back for you. So the old, who was that? Kachuk that did that, used to do that with the Blues in hockey. Used to get traded all the time, then re-sign and get traded, and the team just magically got better.
Was it with the Blues that he did that?
Pretty sure. I'm not entirely sure, but
he was a Winnipeg Jet, the original Jets.
Phoenix, Blues. Yeah, he was he was all over. But I do think that was the one. So I could see that scenario here, because that team in Miami is only going to get better. So it would be if I was a free agent, and I think this is a mistake a lot of free agents make, is they go for the biggest amount of money. I would way rather take 90% of the biggest amount of money and be on a team that's coming up, like a Miami, where I can enjoy my entire contract, and then as an older player potentially have some value out of that from being on a really good team, at the back end of that contract for a short-term one later. So that's what I would do. But again, he's the guy that gets to make the call. So maybe he's got other things in mind, but I like that move.
Well, from a fantasy standpoint, having him in Miami, I think, is a little bit less valuable than San Diego. Obviously, the stacked potential of a San Diego lineup. However, we know Miami has up and coming players. We know guys like Jesus Sanchez who should get a full season run next year. And there are other players, Jazz Chisholm amongst, who could all elevate themselves. And to your point earlier, talking about player mentorship, having a guy like Marte around guys like Chisholm, there's a lot of value in that, right? Put them beside each other in the clubhouse, show them the way. And it's even better sometimes when the guy is a legitimate star and not a character type player, one of those dressing room guys, when they're also the ones who can go out on the field and do it. That might be the best way to show the next generation of your team. And having a guy like Marte come back, that's interesting. It's interesting. All right, next up, Javi Baez, former Cub, went with the Mets, had a little bit of an issue with the media and fans, and all that crap aside, he is best fit to me as a Met. It must have been a move they made because they wanted to see how this would work, Baez and Lindor, and, could that work and how could they go down the stretch? Well, it didn't go great down the stretch as a team, but good D, Ty. And you agree. So are your reasons similar?
Yeah, he actually is better offensively than a lot of people realized. Everybody saw the media outburst and all that other stuff that went on at the beginning, but he was actually quite solid down the stretch. So, I think that's a good fit. I think it keeps Lindor happy, which should produce one of the best defensive infields in baseball with those two up the middle. So I think it's a good move. I think it allows you to re-sign another guy we have further down the list. So I do think that's an option. And the benefit to the Mets is I actually think he's on a huge discount because of the way he played last season and the number of shortstops that are on the market. I think it's a smart move by the Mets to take advantage of what they've been handed to re-sign him.
It will be really interesting to see what happens with those shortstops, like you said, because I feel like there'll be value for the first guy off the board. He's just going to get paid, whoever that free agent shortstop is. And after that, it's going to be a matter of, do the deals get better, or do they all fall in line? Do they all fall in line with that first deal that went through? Very interesting case is the next guy up here, Corey Seager, Kyle's brother, with the Dodgers right now, and most likely Minnesota next year. Sorry, Royce Lewis. Seager is in town, and maybe his signing allows them to deal prospects for proven players, just like we want to see in Dynasty. And I would love, Ty, him to be in Minnesota. In that lineup, you got Donaldson around for power. You got all sorts of fun and exciting things going on. You potentially even have productive fantasy value from the catcher position. I'm not saying it's happening. I'm saying potentially. And if you can get that Minnesota team could be humming along again like they were in 19 and 20, not the 2021 team we saw. Now we know that the pitching took a hit, but they also have more prospects that are coming up. Austin Martin amongst that crew. Let's just see. Kyle Seager, he's going elsewhere. Corey Seager, I think he's a twin. You disagree?
So I disagree on both cases.
Oh my God, you ranked him your second?
I did.
Free agent.
And
I did not see that. Wha!
yeah, I think he is very underappreciated, and I've been consistent on that note. He's battled some things, and I think next year he'll be back to what he's supposed to be. So that's what I'm banking on. I do think he's going to re-sign with the Dodgers. I think they're going to offer him a qualifying contract, and I think he's going to take it. And I think his brother Kyle is going to get picked up by Seattle, and they're going to be free agents in the same year. And so I think that's a really interesting scenario here. But I do think it's the best move for Corey regardless, because the free agent, the qualifying offer is going to be good money. He's going to stay out of the crossfire of this, massive shortstop market. And then he's going to have a little bit of a different market to play with this time next year. He'll also be, kind of another year in with the Dodgers. He might have another option with the Dodgers at that point too. So I think it gives him the most flexibility. I think it's the right move because his value isn't as high as it should be in comparison to some of these other guys. So I think that's what I would be doing in his shoes, is trying to rebuild that value.
Okay, and just so everyone knows, I did look before to see what is the estimated qualifying offer for this year. I couldn't find something that looked accurate. Now, granted, I didn't look for a long period of time, but we would be looking north of $20 million. So if you're given that as a qualifying offer, I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you take it if you think that's the most money you can make next year? Long term, you got to, all pro sport players should, you got to bet on yourself to go out there and perform. So one of the other shortstops amongst all these shortstops is Trevor Story. Believe it's now safe to say former Colorado Rocky, and I think future New York Yankee. I don't like or don't think that he's worth $100 million, but I think he gets it. But there could be Bauer-like opt-outs, so very highly modified. But I also think about the fact that DJ LeMahieu went from Colorado to the Yankees and was better. And Trevor Story had a bit of a decline. I think he could do the same thing as LeMahieu. Ty, you're thinking AL Central.
Yeah, I think Detroit is going to find themselves a shortstop this offseason. And I think the reality is some of the other ones are going to be unavailable, whether it's re-signing or signing elsewhere. And I think Detroit's going to make a heavy play on whoever's available. And I think Story's the most likely one to be available. I think Correa is going to be their first choice because of the AJ Hinch connection there, who's the manager in Detroit. So I think that's the obvious one. But I think Story is the likely one that will be available. And I actually think he might be one of the better values of those guys, right? You've got a big outfield in Detroit. He's the fastest probably of that group. There's some good value to Triple's Alley to him that maybe won't be for some of the other guys. So that's an interesting piece of this puzzle. I think there's a good fit there, and I think they're going to have money to spend, and they're going to focus on shortstop. That's the position that Detroit needs to get solidified. So I think that's an obvious move, and I think that's going to be the easiest one for them to pull down. And
it's a great great free agent class to need a shortstop with, because you actually get to choose, or not choose, but you get to speak with, and ideally get to offer to multiple former All-Stars. So
that's right.
It's not a bad thing. And also former All-Star, Anthony Rizzo, first baseman, longtime Cubby, originally drafted with San Diego and finished off last year with the Yankees. There's talk that he could go back to the Yankees, but imagine if Tampa Bay / Montreal Rays signed him to a 5-year, $125 million deal. They do need a legitimate first baseman, and this would be amazing. It would be one of those shows of good faith that the team is not going to just take all of the revenue sharing dollars and put it in the owner's pocket, because they're already going to have an increased revenue from playing games in Montreal next year and beyond. And this would be something that would, quite frankly, sell tickets. Not that winning shouldn't do it, but it's not in Tampa Bay. So maybe getting a guy like Rizzo would be a little bit of that star pop. So there could be two elements to this.
Get some of that sexy Canadian dollar in your pockets.
Boom, baby. Yeah. What's the dollar sitting at? Is it somewhere in the 70s?
177 or something. Yeah. Or just 77. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's gross.
So that's
either
not
way.
the worst, but it's not great.
I'm putting Fury out there. He's a good fit for this team. They have to make some moves in order to get it done, but I think there's some ways they can do so. Is San Diego, I think, would be a really interesting fit. They need a good left-handed bat there in San Diego. He's got the on-base percentage to be in and around the Mashers. All the other stuff fits there. They do have to move some hay though,
It'd be
and that's
Hosmer. They got to find
Ho-
a home for Hosmer. Yeah.
they have to find a way to hassle the Haas, and and
Where would
probably
he be a fit?
Myers as well. I mean, Texas can take both of them because they're just like, hey, do you play every day? Cool, we're good. We'll take you. So that could be an easy move for Texas to get like nothing or send nothing
Right.
to
Get
San
MLB
Diego.
players in exchange, yeah, for the salaries
And
they
Texas
cost.
has money, right? So I think that would be a really interesting fit. They could do just like relievers or whatever, right? Like there's a deal to be had there, or guys that are for like more lottery ticket guys that are further away. Like that could be another option for that deal. But I think Rizzo would be a great fit there if they can get it done. I don't know if that's really plausible. But I really struggled to write New York Yankees in this spot, so that's why I ended up in San Diego.
Yeah. I don't want to see him full time become a Yankee. So next up is a former Red Sox or current Red Sox, I guess. I think he's going to remain with them. JD Martinez. He's got an opt out, but I mean, there's nowhere to go.
And the injury here in the first couple of weeks of the playoffs seals the fate. Like he's renewing that agreement. There's no way he's going to the market hobbled versus the money that's in that contract. It's not happening.
Yeah, and there's another Red Sox that we'll talk about shortly as well. Next up is Carlos Correa. Ty, you mentioned Detroit getting a shortstop. This is the guy I thought first and foremost was the best fit. Cora being a big part of that. You also believe again that you think there's a fit for Detroit to get a guy. This is the one I think they're going to get. But you think he's going back to Houston?
I think he's going to resign. I think Houston will be stupid to let him go. He's the undeniable core of that team, and whether they want to admit
Correa
it or not,
of that team.
Yeah, correct. He makes that team churn. When he's in the lineup, they're better. There's no questions about it. And they just lost Springer. I don't think they're going to go through it again because they're kind of in this middle window, right, of guys that are at the beginning or near the end, right? So like Correa's got to be the stabilizer, in my opinion. So I think he's going to be the long-term agreement. Like Altuve's got a long-term one. You're going to lose Yuli after next year. What do you got? Brantley's only got
Jose Siri, Kyle Tucker.
Yeah. So, but you have a young core and you need this veteran. So this is the guy I think that they lock into. And I think they made this conscious decision last offseason that it was Springer or Correa, and they chose Correa. So I think that's the reality. If he leaves Houston, I think it's a no-brainer. He's in Detroit. Like I don't even think there's another team at the table if he leaves Houston, because I think Hinch will get him there, and I think that Little Caesars money will get him in Detroit.
What's the $5?
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Noah Syndergaard with the Mets. He's a free agent. I mean, I think he could go back to the Mets. If not, I think it'll be the Yankees. Why leave the limelight when you have so much to prove and you want to be a dominant stud pitcher? Just, stay where you're comfortable. And whether that's the Mets or the Yankees, I think, Ty, you've said it here, pillow contract. That I think is what's best. But you, Ty, you are thinking that Little Caesars money is there's a lot of that Little Caesars money.
I really only have two guys there so far. I've just said that Correa could end up there as well, over Story. So it won't be Correa and Story; it'll be Correa or Story. But I do think Noah Syndergaard's a good fit here. But I do think it's a 1-year sign and trade, because I do think what we saw from Detroit this year was a bit of a mirage. I think they're getting better, and I think they will continue to get better, but I don't think they're going to be a playoff team next year. I think they'll be right about where they were this year, not getting better. And honestly, there could even be a small regression for next year.
Okay.
They won a lot of close games. But I do think Syndergaard's a good fit, high upside. It's going to be relatively cheap to bring in a guy coming off injury. And, if you're Detroit, like you don't want to lock into a pitcher long-term right now. You want to sign a guy probably next offseason. If you're going to get a front-end big ticket guy, that's how you're going to do it. But Syndergaard fits the need now, and that's why I got him there.
Yeah, and I mean, even for speaking specifically of Detroit, like you've got the Mize, Skubal, Manning trio that needs to be able to start for you every fifth day. And I mean, Manning just looked very lost this year. So you've got the opportunity for starts in Detroit, and somebody like Syndergaard should be able to come into that team. Any free agent like him should be able to come into that team, get the ball every fifth day and go, which means through struggles early season struggles, keep getting the ball.
If Detroit does sign a starter this year, I think it's Robbie Ray. I think the lefty is the only other play, just because the righties will be easier for them later. But I still don't think that's the right fit. I think Syndergaard's their guy. In worst case, he's a bullpen arm for them, which they also need.
Whoa. Well, yeah, there was talk of that as a potential for him. Now, next up here, somebody who was the top pitcher in and around the end of June, closing towards the All-Star break this year, Kevin Gausman. Now, this is top pitcher in fantasy, of course. I've got him ranked as my number 19, as does Ty. First time we're synced up. Oh, and we're synced up on the teams too. Good for us. We think Gausman's going back to the Giants. Clearly, he likes it there. And as mentioned previously on this episode, the money should be available. So Gausman remaining a Giant. We'll see what the playoff run does, but it could really help to cement his status as a Giant.
Yeah, I think just like a 4-year, $20 million per, I think is a really, he got 18.9 on this deal that he's on now. So like, I think realistically
inflation gets him to 20.
Yeah, I don't see why not. 20 for 4, I think is a good deal for San Francisco. They've spent worse money in the last 5 years. So why not?
Yeah. All right. Next up here is the 20th ranked guy for me. And then we can move a little faster after this. Mitch Haniger, everybody. I think he might end up with a competitive win now type team like San Diego. Now, I'm saying that knowing that San Diego was not as good as they're supposed to be, but San Diego should not be looking to get a guy who's going to cost lots and lots of money. And I feel like Mitch Haniger just might not cost lots and lots of money. If you think about maybe a 3-year, $8 million per year type deal, if that works, I think that might be good. And, you got all the Dodger lefties that he can just destroy. So,
yeah, I tend to agree with that if he makes it to the market, but he is arbitration eligible. So I do think we will see him stay in Seattle. I think that's the reality, but I agree with you. I think that the NL West is where he'd end up. And if I think he goes to the market, assuming Bryant isn't re-signed in San Francisco, I like him to replace that production out there for the same reason you mentioned in San Diego. So, but I do expect him to remain a Mariner.
Yeah. So next up here, Marcus Stroman. This is a big market type guy. So I think it could be Yankees or Boston. I don't know that he's going to go back to the Mets. I don't know if they necessarily would want him, but like Thor, he wants the spotlight. So Yankee Boston fits that. For the ego, it works. For all that stuff, the money should be in the East. He's been successful in the AL East. So it just seems like a natural fit to me. But Ty, you think he's going to re-up with the Mets?
I think it's the obvious fit. He's got the right fit. The Mets desperately need him. And like I said, if they're re-signing Baez, he's a perfect fit for that team with the infield defense. It just makes too much sense. I will say this: there's no way, as a vocal representative of the community that Stroman is, that he's going to Boston, especially as a black athlete with the issues they've had there.
That's a good point.
I don't think that's going to happen. Like, that's just oil and vinegar.
Well, he could be part of the change. He could want to be part of the change, but
not Stroman. Not that he's not that guy.
Okay.
But
you're not that guy, pal. You're not that
guy. but I just don't think that's a great fit for him up there. Unfortunately, it's a sad scenario, but I'd like to see him stay with the Mets because I think it's the best for his fantasy value. I think he's going to get to be a front end piece behind DeGrom, and I think that's important for him as well.
All right. Carlos Rodon. I think Milwaukee. I think that's the spot that he goes with the highest fantasy value. I think that's the spot that he goes with the opportunity to continue to work through. And they need the last part of that rotation to be better. And he's the type of guy who could provide an upside season. Ty, you're thinking White Sox.
Yeah, I just think they've been good to him.
Baseball has been very, very good to me.
Yeah, he re-signed quickly with them and had a great year. He obviously ran out of gas, which is just in and count stuff for him. I think it would be a good move for him, and I think that team's the right team to want to stick around with. So I think that's a great spot. I think there's a relationship there, and I think it's more than just dollars and cents. So I think it makes sense.
All right. Next up is Adam Duvall, Mr. 1-year contract, finishing off this year with the Braves. I could see him going to a team like Baltimore and possibly having a multi-year deal. And that's the reason why it's Baltimore, because they're the type of team that is, they lost 100 plus games this year. They are looking to get some sort of positive forward movement, and Duvall just matches. He's a power bat. So I'm predicting I would not be upset with him in Baltimore. And just so everyone's aware, fantasy owners here, dynasty guys, Duvall is always a forgotten man. So wait as late as you possibly can in your offseason, but have him as a target. So if he's a free agent in your league, or he's, keep forever dynasty, whatever it is, keeper where you have a draft, he's not going to be kept. Get him on your rosters next year. My goodness, especially if it's daily, he can really pay off for you in season.
Yeah. I think there's a very high likelihood he stays in Atlanta. I think there's a fit there for him. And especially, we still don't really have a full idea of what we're going to see out of Marcell Ozuna yet. So I think
that's true.
This is a good fit for him in Atlanta. If not, I actually think Milwaukee's the possibility here. So I think there's an opportunity for him to steal those same at-bats I talked about earlier with Chris Bryant from Garcia or whoever in that outfield. I mean, even Yelich, for crying out loud, could be having the bat stolen from him, right? Like,
I was just going to say, there's that other dude who's supposed to be a top guy in fantasy, who's got an awful lot to prove to everyone who rosters him in fantasy. But also, that's a good pick, Ty, because if you think about the mentorship that we've mentioned a few times now, you get a guy like Garrett Mitchell, who's a highly touted prospect. You also have a guy in Keston Hiura who, Adam Duvall was like a stud with Cincinnati and then had a lot of struggles. And maybe there's a way that could work itself out where he could help out some of those young guys. Now, Garrett Mitchell would be spring training related, and then he'd need to get called up to the big club. But Keston Hiura could be right there. I mean, I don't know, right? Like, we don't know exactly what's going on, because until the last demotion from Keston Hiura, he was able to mash in AAA, come up and struggle in MLB. But his last demotion, he bat worse. He was like a 140-something hitter in AAA, his final stretch, and then he was promoted yet again, I think, just to like throw the kid a bone. But the idea of the mentorship and things like that work, but as well from a fantasy perspective, Adam Duvall, no matter where he goes, we know there's power there, and we know he always has the ability to win you a week. And depending on your lineup structure, there's no way you should ever turn up or turn away the opportunity to have a guy like Duvall who could have, 10, 20 amazing days over the course of a season, but he puts them together in pockets of 4 and 5 days. Gets a lot of those stats. So here's our first closer, Ty, Raisel Iglesias. So I could see him going to Oakland because they tried with Trevor Rosenthal and it didn't work. So maybe they'll just try here. He's got a better track record for health. So former Cincinnati closer went to the Angels this year, and then the Angels were not good, but Iglesias is good.
Yeah, I agree that Oakland's a great option. I just don't think it's the right dollar amount for Oakland. So I think that's going to be the issue. I actually think this is going to be a Toronto fit. I think this is the one bullpen move that they need to make. And I think as much as that bullpen struggled throughout most of this year, it's actually pretty solidified heading into next year. It's just missing that real dominant power arm. I could see them making a move for a lefty to bring in a potential veteran like Andrew Miller, who we have further down the list. But I do think like one solid, what they tried to do with Kirby Yates last season. And I think Iglesias is the guy this season. So I think there's an obvious target in match here for both fits.
Okay, well, before it happened officially, Adam Wainwright was on the board. He has re-upped with St. Louis, which we both said and also commented, never leave. Next guy up, I think, Ty, from the offseason we've seen so far with Mr. Kyle Schwarber, that mutual option will 100% be picked up. I don't see why Schwarber would decline it. I don't see why the Red Sox would, unless Schwarber or Schwarber's agent thinks that there's a ton of money out there. Boston's the right fit for him for next year.
Well, and the reality is there is some left-handed bats on the market this year, which isn't always the case. So I think he'll take the mutual as well. The chance to play with this team in Boston makes sense. And the reality is, everyone talked about why Boston didn't go get Rizzo. I think they went and got Schwarber for the exact reason we're talking about, which is the mutual option. I think they have every intention of extending Schwarber. He's a great fit for that roster. It makes sense, and it's a great fit for your fantasy lineup as well. So I think it's a no-brainer for him to stay in Boston.
Yeah, next up here, Jorge Soler. Remember Jorge Soler, everyone? Well, he finished this year powerful. And I think he might want to stay in Atlanta if that option is available, because as we've said, there are outfield options in Atlanta. But if not, I kind of like the idea of him in Toronto. Now, I know it sounds weird because they've got a bunch of outfielders already, but a straight power guy, he could bat 6 or 7. The average doesn't need to be a big thing for him. I mean, Randall Grichuk was batting 9th towards the end of the year, and he'll be back next year. So he might be the type of guy that they might want to move out if they could get someone who is younger, could be a bit more impactful with the power. But he did save his season, possibly his career in Atlanta. So there might be a little bit of that. Let me stay where the goodness is, or where the juice is worth the squeeze if he gets to stay in Atlanta. But again, there are some other factors, like you mentioned, Ty, with Ozuna, that need to be cleared up from a money standpoint on that front.
Well, and we got to assume we're not going to see Acuna until at least August as well. So Atlanta has to think about, like, we've got a core that's ready to win, right? And so if that's the case, like, they also need to make sure that they're in contention when Acuna is back on the field.
And
right?
I believe that the Braves won their division with the least wins of any division winning team this year.
That's correct.
So you can't expect to do that next year. You need to have 4 or 5 options in that outfield.
They would have finished 4 games behind the Blue Jays, who finished 4th in their division.
Fun fact. Fun fact. That's something that fantasy owners get upset about. When their division is strong and good teams in their division don't make it. But there's no crying in baseball, right?
No.
Tommy Hanks said that best. So next up is Mark Canha. With Oakland, I think this could be a Cincinnati fit because they love their outfielders, as previously mentioned, and he fits the mold. Now the conversation with Senzel as a star is over. It can just be about production, and Mark Canha is a productive outfielder. You're going back to that Milwaukee well.
Yeah, I think Milwaukee's going to get an outfielder. I really do. I think they're going to get one. So I'm going to put 2 eggs in that basket and see if one of them hits. Both right-handed bats. I think it's a good look for them. So I think that's a smart option. I do think there's an outside shot he stays in Oakland. But and the other one that I was thinking was San Francisco here. I can't figure out who's going to be in that outfield moving forward. It's too hard to figure out. So I haven't really tried yet.
Well, to your point with San Francisco, Ty, I mean, Tommy La Stella is leading off. You know, they are not afraid of veterans. Is I guess what I kind of meant with that. Not that La Stella is a bad player by any stretch, but
that front office and coaching staff has done an unbelievable job of balancing that lineup. Like, you look at a guy like Lamonte Jr., who's had a great season, right? You know, you've talked about Darren Ruff, and Canha fits that guy. Like, he's a righty masher, right? He could be part of that platoon scenario that they got going on there. So that's why I like that one, but I also like it for the exact same reason in Milwaukee. So that's why I put him there.
Okay. All right. Next up, we've got Charlie Blackmon. He's got a player option. I think he just takes it. I think he wants to stay in Colorado. He's seen the landscape. He may want to retire as a Rocky. I can't imagine he'd be able to stay in right field elsewhere unless he improves power, has one of those kind of Votto switches. So for me, that's the fit. But you're thinking the rebuilding Washington Nationals.
I mean, Charlie, if you're listening and you stay in Colorado, you're an idiot. Don't do that.
Direct.
Yeah. I had initial thought, I'd be like, man, he could be a Yankee, because that actually would make a lot of sense with Gardner retiring and, you know, them needing someone to play defense and his ability to hit the ball out to right field. There's just a ton of sense there for the Yankees, but again, couldn't write it down. I think Washington as an interesting scenario, because like Washington's not that bad. Once they had Soto back, they weren't terrible. But if you add a little bit of that, you add the production of a developing Kieboom, you take Zimmerman out of the role that he was in, which was not a good fit.
And he didn't play much down the stretch either. So that was kind of a sign that it may really be over for him with the Nats, that he wasn't getting, even final week he was sitting.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I mean, Keibert Ruiz is coming around.
Tell me about Luis Garcia. Say it.
No, I'm not doing it. No,
say it, Luis Garcia.
Well, we could see AL Tuna. Could be our guy, right? We might see him come on back.
Andrew Stevenson.
Yep, like they've got pieces, and we talked about Lane Thomas, who's been doing a
Yes,
job,
thank
right?
you. That was
Like,
the other guy.
you know, there's pieces there, and Blackman would be a nice piece to solidify the middle of that lineup. And if he's available, I think he's a good fit to that, because then you've got Soto, Bell, Blackman, right? And that is
Is
an interesting.
Bell? Yeah, Bell's not
Believe
on this
Bell's
list.
back. Yeah, I believe Bell's back. So, you know, it's not that far off, right? That it's a terrible roster, but their bigger pitchers is pitching. But it could be an interesting opportunity. Rizzo is the GM there, certainly not shy of free agency.
True. Next up, Brandon Belt, unfortunately, injured with the Giants. We both think he's going to go back. I say he might need to take a pay cut to do it, and that would simply be because the Giants have decided, Farhan Zaidi has decided now is the time, and they're going to use free agency as the Giants famously have before. So they might say, Brandon, we want you here. This is what we can afford to pay you. And I mean, we're talking millions of dollars. So at this point in time, it would be, is he able to set his ego aside and try to be part of a winning team yet again? Because he was on one, I believe for sure, but possibly two of those World Series teams when they went every other year over the course of 6 years. So this might be something he's very willing to do.
Yeah, he was on two of those teams.
Was he 2 of the 3? Okay.
I have an interesting take on Brandon Bell. I think he's going to leave for a couple different reasons. One, I think what you just said, San Francisco, I don't think has the money to pay him what he's worth. And I think this is because he's a little bit older free agent at 33. This is going to be the only time he's going to get paid. So I think that aligns with him leaving. And I think the other part is too, like, I think he might just have a little chip on his shoulder. He's got 167 home runs in his career, but like he's a better hitter than that. Like he does hit more home runs than that number based on the games that he's played. So I think he might look at a different option. Like if you look at his home away splits, of those 167 home runs, only 67 of them are at home, right? So I think there's a possibility where he's like, you know what, I might just go try hitting somewhere else. I might go to Yankee Stadium, which they will have a spot for him, and he might be cheaper than Rizzo, right? So that's an option. He could end up in Texas too. They also have a need for a first baseman. I looked where he's from because I always like to do that in free agency
because it could be very important.
Yeah, and I don't know how to say this town, so if anyone's from this town, I apologize, but I have to say it. He is from Nacogdoches, Texas. It's spelled Nacogdoches.
Sounds very Japanese.
Nacogdoches. I think I got it right. Nacogdoches.
Okay, is that close to like Mexico?
No idea.
Like very south?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think San Francisco is the first spot, but I could very much see him in New York or Texas as well.
All right, so we'll go a little quicker here now that we're into the 30th ranked guy. That's Nelly Cruz, 1-year deal. I'm thinking he goes back to the Mets. Ty, you're thinking Texas. Is that a money move, a return to his original glory and that amazing outfield blunder in the World Series?
I was literally just like, who might want?
Who would want this?
Yeah, like that was literally how I got to Texas. Was like maybe. So like that was just honestly me throwing a dart at the board.
Yeah, whoever's going to offer him money is going to be at the top of his list, like career accomplishments aside. Yes, yeah, right. Absolutely. It has to be an AL team unless the DH is somehow, cemented in the NL.
That changes everything in this list if that's the case.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of things. Cesar Hernandez with club option with the White Sox. I think it's picked up and I think he stays. You agree. Andrew McCutchen, club option with Philly. Again, I think he stays.
Philly does not have a choice. They need to pick up that option.
You agree there. Then we get into Michael Conforto, who I have ranked way back. And that has a lot to do with his fantasy value because he sucks whenever he's on my roster. So I don't like Michael Conforto, and I've been waiting patiently, and it's just taken too long. We had that shortened 2020 amount of brilliance, but we didn't get it back in 2021. So I think he could be one of those Minnesota Twin type veteran players. Buxton could be, out. I mean, he'll get hurt for sure, but before that, he could just be traded. They could just make room for a guy like Conforto, and that's how you help to turn the page on that outfield. But Ty, you're a little more optimistic, and you're thinking he's headed north.
I think I will say this. I think Michael Conforto will be the best money spent on the market this offseason, right? In terms of what he gets paid versus his production. I just like there's guys that are going to get paid a ton of money that are worth every penny, but like in terms of the discount type of guy, I think
Mhm.
Conforto is going to be the top of that list. So Toronto desperately needs a left-handed bat somewhere, and there's a lot of ways they can acquire that left-handed bat. We talked about
They have
Gregor
Rowdy Talise.
Polanco.
Oh, sorry, he's hitting
Yeah,
playoff home runs for the Brewers. Sorry.
that's right. So exactly, we talked about how much we didn't like that trade, but
Absolutely.
they need to replace that type of production, and Conforto could give them that. He can also give them good outfield defense with a left-handed bat, which they desperately need. Right? They tried to have Corey Dickerson fill in there. They do have Polanco, as I said, in AAA, and a guy that impressed out of spring training last year, Josh Palacios. So I think that's the conversation in Toronto is like, how do we get one of those left-handed bats to actually make us better, so that we can get rid of one of these right-handed bats, or both of these guys potentially, to get rid of one of these right-handed bats. So I think that's a great fit. Left-handed bats, you can never have too many. So I say Toronto, but he could end up literally anywhere.
Yeah, and I have Eddie Rosario as that potential extra outfield guy that could end up in Toronto. You have him as a potential Washington piece. I guess that would be if Blackman is not
Correct.
the guy, because you're going to take a veteran out there because, Robles is just not getting her done and needs that. And Soto is so damn good. You can't not sign free agents in Washington and have a lost Soto year. That would be bad. And you don't want him to get angry. Tommy Pham, another outfielder out on the market this year. I think he might end up as a White Sox. Now, I mean, crowded outfield, but I'm just taking a stab at a 3-year deal.
I like the 3-year deal, but I like him in somewhere like Baltimore. Unfortunately for Tommy Pham, he spent most of his career in a crowded outfield. So I think the reality is he's going to go somewhere where he does not have that experience, and where better than Baltimore, Maryland. So I just think the reality is like he's going to be looking for playing time, as he should.
Yeah, be
He's
Cedric Mullins himself and Austin Hayes.
solidified that outfield, right? And Baltimore offensively, that was not their issue, right? They can swat it. They just need to learn how to pitch. So Pham gives you good defense as some of their young pitchers start to get to the higher levels, right? We should see some of the guys that we thought were going to be more helpful this season, like a Dean Kramer, and a couple other guys. What was the guy we talked about last week that pitched down the stretch?
Oh,
The righty. I can't remember his name.
oh, Jeepers Creepers. I don't know.
It's
I'll have a quick look here.
It's eluding me at the moment here, but you've got DL Hall and Grayson Rodriguez that are coming. So having a good veteran outfield, or at least a good defensive outfield overall, is a good move, and Pham gets them in that direction. So I like this fit for them. I think it's an obvious sign that they get an outfielder, and I think Pham would be a good fit.
I agree on that one here, Ty. I'm just trying to find.
Well, you go ahead. I'll jump down to Johnny Cueto, who has a mutual option with the Giants in San Francisco. I think the Giants are going to decline that one. I think you mentioned it earlier. They had an $180 million payroll. There's equivalent pitchers out there to Johnny Cueto that I think are reasonable signs ahead of Cueto. So I think the Giants will decline this option, in my opinion.
It's fair. Now, another guy that's not on this list, but also is a Giant, because I think if the money works, they might want to have Cueto back, but that would be it, because they did do something with Alex Wood this year, right? They brought him back after a disastrous year. He's starting in the playoffs. Like it's weird. It's weird, but you got a guy who's not on our list in Alex Wood. So Johnny Cueto coming back, that, maybe that could be a fit. Eduardo Rodriguez, I could see him going to Washington as part of, the Rizzo can't stop signing pitchers thing that's going on there. That would be an interesting one for me. You did touch on him as a potential Giant guy. So circling back to somebody who I put in prior to this was before Antonio Senzatella re-upped on a 5-year, $52 million deal with Colorado. I thought John Gray was going to go back to Colorado because he wasn't traded, and I assumed there was something to him not being traded. But Ty, you disagree. I think he definitely gets a qualifying offer, which would really hurt. I don't know if he would truly, because that's a lot of money Colorado's going to have to offer him, but it would also kill his ability to get a deal, because I don't know if a team's going to be really willing to give up a lot of cash, give up a pick for him. But you're thinking he's headed to the AL East, but not to the team you've said over and over and over to.
If you're a free agent as a pitcher and your agent hands you a contract that says you're going to Colorado, you fire that agent, right? You just fire him immediately. And it doesn't matter whether you've been there or not.
What if you're a two-way player?
That could make that, you know what, that could be interesting. I like that question. But
Yeah.
I like Boston here. I think they have a desperate need for pitching, anyone and everyone, and I think this is a good fit. I could see him honestly anywhere in the AL East. I think there's a lot of options there. I could see him in Chicago. I do think there's a 0% chance he ends up in Colorado, and I think it's not because he doesn't in his heart believe that he might want to stay. I just think he's going to have too many good options on the market. I think he's going to be that mid-tier guy that gets a bigger contract than he deserves, because there's going to be so many people chasing him.
Chris Ellis is the Baltimore pitcher we were talking about. 29 years old. He's got a lot of control left with Baltimore. And just to put a bow on the potential Baltimore's rotation for next year, John Means, Bruce Zimmerman, Keegan Aiken, and Zach Lothar, all lefties. Very interesting, with Chris Ellis being the lone righty. Okay, that's fun. That's fun facts. Zach Greinke, veteran, not the pitcher he once was, but still finds a way to be effective. I could see him going to Atlanta because you want to win. You go with a team like that. We've mentioned their potential need to be better and to be deeper. So Greinke would help with that. Ty, you're thinking Seattle.
Yeah.
Is that because the West Coast is the best coast?
No, I like it, just the veteran guy in that rotation. They don't really have one.
Marco Gonzalez.
Yeah, and they need to get rid of him.
Marco Gonzalez.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty sad when Marco Gonzalez throws slower than Greinke. That's when you know you have an issue, right? So
10-year age difference.
Yeah. So that's the issue here. I mean, the reality is I think Greinke would be a great fit on that team. He's a pitcher. Service was a pitcher. I just think there's some connections there, and I think they need to sign a pitcher. So whether they try to bring back Paxton on the deal they wanted him on this year, or whether they're bringing in like a Greinke, I would take Greinke over the bag of bolts you're getting from Paxton. That's my thoughts. So we'll see.
If you're deciding between those guys, I 100% agree with you on that one, Ty. I think Greinke would be great in Seattle.
Well, and I think he'd be good for the young pitchers, which they have.
Yeah, and they want more of them up, right? So you could potentially have, let's see, how could you do this? You'd have a Greinke.
You have to get rid of Marco Gonzalez. So that's the first start.
Well, okay, so let's say that happens. It won't. Don't worry, guys. It won't happen. Let's say they do. They get rid of Gonzalez, so they would have like Greinke at some point in time, Logan Gilbert, Hankins. My goodness, who am I forgetting? I know the Seattle system too well. I'm blanking on everybody. Pardon me?
Say Flexen.
I did not say Flexen, but you're right. Flexen would be back next year. Anyway, I was just thinking of the three young prospects, and I can only name Gilbert and Hankins at the moment. Or sorry,
Kirby.
I was even saying Hankins, and it's Hancock. Thank you.
Kirby's
George Kirby is the other one. So you could have that core, not to mention the bonus of having a guy like Greinke, assuming he will talk to his teammates. Having him around as a positive would be great. Yeah. Now, next up here, because now we're at rank 40, right? We're 40th ranked guy, and Christian Vasquez. Yeah, and a couple catchers here. Christian Vasquez, we think, will just go back to Boston. It's a club option, so they're going to take it. He's hit a walk-off against T-Bay in the playoffs. Wong is not ready. They want to be competitive. It's a fit. Buster Posey, club option as well with San Francisco. He's got to retire a Giant. It would be so poor if he didn't. You know, that's what he's one of those handful of guys. And further down, we have another catcher tie just to clear the deck of catchers. Robert Perez with Cleveland. I mean, it's a crummy defensive kind of catcher. He'll just resign.
It's underappreciated though, even in fantasy.
But I think, Cleveland knows enough that I think he was the highest paid player on their team this year. He'll probably come back next year, depending on what's up with Bieber. And his ARB status probably not even there yet. Otherwise, he'd be on the trade block. But so that's the catchers there. So now we've got a couple of third base guys to talk about. Eduardo Escobar. I think if some things don't come in place with Toronto with one of those big name guys, I think he could end up in a Blue Jay uniform because they need a free agent infielder, whether they go with second, whether they go with third, whether they go with both. I think Eduardo Escobar is a fit there. You've got him going to Texas. Is that really like playing time? And
100%.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. I think for Texas, it's a good deal because Eduardo's the kind of guy that he could probably sign on a 1 or 2 year deal and have to flip, right? Because they're still a couple years away from being relevant. So I think not quite a pillow contract type deal, but somewhere where he can come in and produce, and that can be part of the pitch. Hey, we want to bring you in, we want to overpay you because we know we're not there, but we want to trade you. This is why we're doing this. It works for you, works for us. Let's get a deal done.
All right. Now here's another, and this is my primary option for the hot corner in the Great White North, and that is Kyle Seager. He does have a club option, but I mean, all indications are that Seattle is not going to pay that money. Ty, you think Seattle will?
Yes.
But their payroll was only 89 mil this year. I don't think they're going to have much more than that to play with this offseason. Kikuchi was the other veteran guy that I was thinking of who could remain in that rotation. And again, it was a 6-man rotation. And that's not to mention Mr. Dunning and Mr. Sheffield, who are also kicking around. So that could be interesting.
I just think for the borderline 40 home runs you get from Seager, like 20 mil is not that bad for a guy that's been the backbone of your team, left-handed bat, right? Like that's the other piece. They don't have a ton of left-handed bats, right? So to give that up, it's only a $2 million buyout, I think. So I don't think it's that bad.
Yeah. I think it's just the fact that that's turned the page. Like now, Ty France, I will say, great defensive first base season that he had. But Evan White still has 4 years left on that, MLB deal that he signed. So I think it's his. I think it's like first base is his. And so Ty France could move over to third. That's where my head's at on that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that, but I think Kyle Seager is better as a trade asset than he is heading out the door. So, I think the reality is for $20 million to have a left-handed corner infield bat to trade, I think is a better move because at the same time, like Haniger is a free agent next year as well. So you might need to retain the power later as well. So I think that's something that has to be on their radar. But that's your boy Jerry DiPoto's got to make that call. So maybe you can get him on the phone and we'll figure it out.
First, DiPoto needs his own contract. If that has not yet been settled.
Yeah, he got extended.
Okay, he did.
Yeah.
Okay. So now he's going to start to work on everybody else, but we'll see. So Zach Davies, SP5, hope he outperforms it. And he was a Cub this year. I think he's perfect for the Yankees.
Yeah.
But you think he's going back to the Cubbies?
I do. I just think they're going to make an effort. They obviously saw value in him when they made the Yu Darvish trade. And I think, if you're a Zach Davies and you want to build up some value, like you need innings, you need to go somewhere where you're going to pitch. And he's going to pitch in Chicago and he's going to pitch against a pretty weak division. So, if he signs a short-term deal, like 2 years or something like that, that makes a ton of sense for Davies to potentially leapfrog it into a 4-year deal to kind of back end his career a little bit.
Okay, so now we've got Starlin Castro, middle infield, second base type guy. Not a lot of high upside for us here, but in your deeper leagues, he's a guy that needs to be rostered, and I think he could find himself on a team like Miami where he could move around a little bit on that infield. If you have another injury to somewhere, then all of a sudden he starts to get regular at bats. But either way, I could see him with 15 type at bat per week guy. So in a daily lineup league, or even if it's weekly and your rosters are locked and you're concentrating your powers elsewhere, he's a perfect bench bat. And if the playing time goes up, boom, he's in your lineup. And Ty, you've got him slated with Baltimore, which would be perfect for that full-time playing time.
Yeah, I think it's exactly it. Like, there's two options. He can play second. Like, they don't want to be rolling Pat Valleca and Jomani Jones out there. They really don't want to be rolling Kelvin Gutierrez out there. And they definitely don't want to be rolling Richie Martin out at shortstop. So, there has to be
Ramon Urias, Ty. That's the shortstop of the future in Baltimore. I'm telling you.
No, it's the other kid that's in AA. I can't remember his name. He's the future.
Gunnar Henderson.
That's the one. Yep. So I like this fit. Like a 1-year deal. It makes a ton of sense. Same reason we just talked about before with sign and trade with Escobar. I think exactly that here in Baltimore. They tried it last year with Franco it had mediocre success early, then it fell off a cliff. I think you're going to see something similar here with Castro.
All right, next up, Corey Kluber. I think that weak rotation in the Yankees, as I just mentioned, with Zach Davies potentially signing, I think he goes back to the Yankees. Ty, you're on board with that too.
I am. Yeah, I do think there's an outside chance, assuming the Jays lose their free agents, that like there's the Shapiro Atkins connection to Corey Kluber from the Cleveland days. Like I could see that if he's out there and Toronto loses Matson and Ray, that could make sense as a veteran guy in that rotation as well.
As long as it was a good relationship, right? As long as they had a good. Yeah,
I would assume so because they plucked him from San Diego and made him a superstar. So I would assume they're on good terms.
True. Dylan Bundy. This is just a Minnesota guy. And the reason is look what Minnesota did last year, right? They brought in Hap. Who was the other dude they brought in? They brought in another guy. Doesn't matter. They brought in veteran pitchers, and they might want to just go ahead and do that one more time. And Dylan Bundy is 100% rebound territory. Ty, I like your landing spot for him with the Giants. That'd be fun. That would give him some undeserved fantasy relevance headed into redraft season.
I just think that they can do some things with him, and I like that. I do like your Minnesota pick though. To be fair, I don't hate that concept either. Both for very similar reasons. Like, what's the big thing that's haunted Bundy almost his entire career? It's home runs.
Ghost. Sorry.
Yeah. So, well, and Joe Madden apparently. So the reality here though is I think he's gonna be looking for one of those two big ballparks, and I think both teams would have an interest in a guy like him that pounds the zone. Minnesota is notorious for liking the guys that throw strikes, so I think there's an answer here with one of those two teams at the end of the day.
Well, the next pick here, and to be fair, may not even get a contract, but if he does, rebound injury candidate, James Paxton, I could see him going back to Seattle. Now, this is going to have to be super team friendly, like we talked about before we started recording, a 2-year deal where they help him finish off the rehab this year, 2022, and then they get him for a full season at a discount, very much like they did with Ken Giles. And depending on how that goes with Giles, we could see a lot more of that in the future, where an injured player ends up getting a 2-year deal. We see it with minor league type guys. This could be the opportunity for a player like Paxton who could provide some real pop. But in what was it, Ty, like 1.1 innings that he pitched as a Mariner this year?
Yeah,
you could argue he owes the organization, right? You could argue that. And if not them, I could see a team like Kansas City, who, yes, I know the KC5, the KC6, it's strong-ish, but you could get a guy like Paxton to throw into that mix. And when things happen with, Keller, and when the breakout occurs with Bubik, you got Singer solidifying himself, you could throw in a guy like Paxton, and all of a sudden KC is a tough place to go for the weekend.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I really don't know where Paxton's going to be. It's just the injury makes him so uncertain.
Yeah, there should be 30 teams interested depending on the dollars.
You know where it would be an interesting spot, and I'm thinking about it for somebody further down the list, but might be a really good fit here on that 2-year model is Pittsburgh, right? That might be a really good fit on that one to do the 2-year sign with the expectation of the 2nd-year rehab. And he's going to get paid more money to do that. So I think it might be on the table given, his career could be over. I think it'd be worth the risk for him to try. I could also see Detroit being a fit here. I had Robbie Ray there as a possibility and Syndergaard as well. Like, I think they're going to be looking to fill one spot in that rotation. So I'm throwing a couple darts at the board here as we get down into this part of the list.
Yeah, we're up now to the 50th ranked free agent with fantasy relevance, and that's Corey Dickerson. Finished the year with Toronto. I think next year Kansas City might be one of those. Veteran depth piece, right? Like if he goes to a really weak team, and I'm not saying KC is a weak team, but if he goes to a really weak team, a Pittsburgh type team, as you've got, Ty, that's the perfect scenario. Yeah. But even a team like Pittsburgh was rejecting Brian Goodwin's, who then turned out to go to Chicago, like to the White Sox, and have a productive season. And Brian Goodwin, by the way, not on this list, but he's one of those guys who we just need to see what's up this offseason with. And when we get into the real deep stuff, the post 50, and guys are signing and stuff, we can talk about the Brian Goodwins as they get contracts.
Yeah, and I like the left-handed bat in Pittsburgh. I think that's the part that I think is the best part of the fit there. I also think he might get more than 1 year in Pittsburgh. So I think that's the other thing. I don't think he's going to get a lot of multi-year offers.
Right now, we do have a couple of those. Andrelton Simmons, probably the last guy of note as far as like well-known major league player that could do something in fantasy. That's not a relief pitcher, because the relief pitcher market we know is very tedious. I've got it written here as Baltimore because they, for if Urias isn't the starter, if he's a second base type guy, they've got, let's date back to Iglesias 2 years ago, Freddie Galvis last year. They just get a veteran type shortstop. So Andrelton Simmons could absolutely be that guy and turn around and trade him. And Ty, you think he might go to the Yankees, which I could absolutely see too.
Yeah, I just same reason you just said, Baltimore, defensive shortstop. Like the Yankees don't need the power. So a guy that can just put bat on ball and play good defense, perfect.
So I'll just rhyme off the rest of them, and then I'll say where you think they're going to land, Ty, and then if you want to talk about any of them, let's do that. So this is 52, Trevor Bauer. There's that opt-out. There's also those legal issues. And as a joke, I said, let's just say he gets it all cleared and everything's fine. Houston, because, the shirts sell themselves, right? Houston, we have a problem. That, boom, $30. But anyway, we've got other guys, because Ty, you think Bauer might be out of baseball. I agree that's a strong possibility. We've got Matt Harvey, who pitched a full year with Baltimore. Ty, you think the money might be there in Asia. Adam Ottavino with Boston. Ty, you think Atlanta might be a good option for him. Ryan Zimmerman, I think it's either Washington or retires. Ty is the same thing. Jackie Bradley Jr.'s got a player option, so he could be back in Milwaukee. Gregory Polanco, who was cut by Pittsburgh, I think, and then Toronto picked him up and put him in AAA. It's something like that. Yeah. He moved around a little bit, I think, towards the end of the year. Anyway, Ty, you think he's going to stick around in Toronto, try to rebuild himself there? Kendall Graveman as an RP option who had a good year with Seattle, traded to Houston, continued it. I could see him landing with Toronto because they need relief pitchers, and he did start his career there. Ty, you think he goes to the AL East, but to Boston. So they need options. They need cheap options. Kendall Graveman should be RP affordable. Brad Hand. We see no other way for him to do anything other than end up in Cleveland. Go back, try to be with a pitching coach that you liked. Find a team. It doesn't necessarily need to be Cleveland. Find out wherever your favorite pitching coach is or your favorite coach that helps you. Go get yourself a minor league deal with that team and try to end your career on a positive note, because this past year, especially the trade to Toronto, just tanked him. And it's really unfortunate because there was that $10 million option that was declined. And then it was like, why aren't 29 other teams going after it? By the time you saw what happened in Toronto, they just seemed to be done with him, as if he was hurt or something. Anyway, Archie Bradley also available. Ty thinks he's a future Cub. Jesus Familia, longtime Met. Ty thinks he's headed to Colorado. Oh, wow, that would be terrible. But hey, closes count. Closes do count. Kirby Yates coming back from the injury. I feel like he's a San Diego guy. Go back to where he had success, very much like Brad Hand, but allow yourself to rehab with San Diego. And why wouldn't they want to take a depth piece? Ty thinks also West Coast, but thinking the Athletics. Trevor Rosenthal coming back from injury. I don't know what's going to happen with him. Ty thinks Baltimore's a fit. I agree. He owes Oakland, though. And Andrew Miller, if he decides to come back, depending on what's up with Andrew Miller, Oakland could be a great spot. And Ty, you have the Mexican superstar who was out of Major League Baseball last year and played in Mexico, Roberto Osuna. What are you thinking about that? Do you think he's blackballed?
I mean, I think to some extent, yes. But I think at some point, there has to be a conversation about, some sort of return to baseball for him. I mean, he's too young, too much talent. I think that will eventually win the day once it's quieted down and they can tell a story about his retribution and forgiveness and all this other stuff that he's going to need to be able to communicate in order to be part of Major League Baseball again. But I do think the career numbers are just too good for him to sit in the Mexican League. And I think if his career was truly over, he would have done one of two things. He would have went and played in Asia, or he would have shut it down. But I think if there's a pathway back, I think he's on it. And I do think there's going to be at least a team that's willing to give this kid a second chance.
That's interesting that you made the Asia comment, because a guy that I was debating on putting on this list, but did not, is Roberto Ramos, who I spent a lot of time talking about 2 years ago because he was the Colorado Rocky prospect who asked to be let go of the organization and so that he could sign in Asia. He went and had a huge 2020 and had a much more disappointing 2021. I don't know that he's going to be able to come back based on the combined numbers. He should definitely get a 1-2 year major league deal, but I don't know. And I don't know a lot about his defense because I've been studying the offense of him more. So there's a potential that he might come back. If you hear the name, you're definitely going to hear me talking about it because I still have him in several dynasty leagues because what he showed in the minors and AAA dominating, going to Asia dominating, he could definitely come back. And I do, Ty, I have a 50-year-old coworker named Steven who is Korean. And he and I have trouble communicating because, English is his second language and I do not speak Korean. So when we're working in the kitchen together, we found common ground with baseball. So he loves to talk to me about the Blue Jays. And then we were talking about the fact that he is a huge KBO fan. So I have been learning from him about the ebb and flow of different teams. And I look forward to bringing that new education that I'm getting from Steven at work to the podcast. So every KBO signing, I should have something to say. And then we'll really find out if Steven's smart or if he's just making me and then hopefully not, but making everyone else that's listening to the podcast worse.
Yeah.
But hey, you take your information where you can get it. It's coming straight from a Korean. All right. That's
right,
legit.
That's right. That's a good spot. So let us know where you think some of these guys will land. We'll have lots to talk about this offseason as we look at these guys and where they end up and where they might end up as the news evolves. But be sure, again, as Robbie said, hit us up on the Twitter machine at DingersPod or at RobbieBaseball1 or myself at Turney Boss. But until next time, it has been Tyler and Rob here on Dingers.